What's up guys, DPX here, welcome back to another show review. Today I'm reviewing The Last of Us Season 2. And before we get started, you know what to do. Be sure to like the video, comment, subscribe, and leave a comment, or I'll hit you with a golf club. So this one is very tricky. I knew it was going to be tricky to review it even before the first episode, because give my thoughts, background opinion on The Last of Us as a whole. Part 1, one of the greatest stories of any singular game ever. And I really feel like, maybe not just The Last of Us, but I feel like The Last of Us, the game, the first game, really helped video games become more cinematic, you know what I mean? And likewise, Season 1 of The Last of Us, which adapted that first game, I think is the best video game adaptation ever. Might not be the best movie or show based off of a video game, but when it comes to adapting the source material, I think The Last of Us Season 1 is bar none. Then we get Last of Us Part 2, the game, and that one's a bit more controversial. My opinion on it is, in terms of the story, because the gameplay's fine and all, but in terms of the story, it has some interesting ideas. It takes risks that I can, commend it for. You know, it doesn't play it safe, but at the same time, a lot of the things it does, it feels like it's trying to be shocking, and the execution isn't that good. But I was willing to put that aside going into Season 2. But after seeing Season 2, I'm really conflicted. Because on the one hand, if you're talking about this show, or this season, as an adaptation of the game, say what you want about what it's adapting, but it's adapting it really well. They're doing this one a little differently, because the first game, that was the first season. The second game, they're splitting it up into, well, they've already announced a Season 3, so they're definitely splitting it up into 2 seasons. There are talks of a 4th season. So it sounds like Season 2 is going to be an adaptation of Last of Us Part 2, but from Ellie's perspective. And then Season 3 is going to be Abby's perspective. And then Season 4 is just going to be the finale of everything. Which I guess is an interesting idea. I'm a little afraid that they are stretching this out, you know? I don't feel like The Last of Us Part 2, you know, it's definitely a longer story than the first game, but I don't feel like it's that much longer to where the first game gets 1 season and the second game gets 3 seasons. That's a little worrying. But as for this season, it's a little odd. I will be going into spoilers. You know, I don't want to spoil anything too crazy, but there are certain things that this show does from the game that I want to talk about. The first thing, obviously, is the elephant in the room when you talk about The Last of Us Part 2, and that is Joel. Joel dies at the very beginning. You know, he dies at the beginning of the game, and that was shocking, and a lot of people took issue with that. I feel like that is an interesting move. Maybe it wasn't as executed the best in the game, but I don't inherently have an issue with them killing off Joel at the beginning of the game. It's a little different when you do it at the beginning of the beginning of a season of a show. Because with this might be trivial, but The Last of Us Part 1, the game, and The Last of Us Part 2, the game, are 2 different games. One's a sequel, yeah, sure, one's a continuation, yeah, but they're 2 different games, they're 2 different products. Last of Us Season 1 and Last of Us Season 2 it's 2 different seasons of the same show. It's 2 different pieces of the same puzzle, you know what I mean? So you established a character in the first season, and it's from his perspective and everything, and then once the second season starts, you kill him off. Now I understand, you know, you're adapting The Last of Us Part 2 game, you know, you had to kill off Joel eventually, and I do kind of, I have to give them props for having the balls to just get right to it, you know, just do it the way they did that, you know. But on the other hand, I feel like, because there's a significant time jump between part 1 and part 2, and therefore season 1 and season 2, and I feel like you could have maybe, like, filled out the show, you know, you could have gotten a couple of seasons by exploring that time jump, and they did in one of the episodes in season 2, which was probably the best episode of season 2. But I feel like there's more you could have done. The scene where they kill off Joel, I think, was handled a lot better. When that happens, you understand, like, who Abby is and why she's killing Joel. And, like, in the game, they don't do that. Like, you find out, like, all that stuff afterwards. So I do like that change. And Abby as a character, again, interesting, because when you look at the game, it's like you go around shooting people. You know, Joel went around shooting everyone in the hospital at the end of the first game, but, like, those are real people with, like, families and stuff. So Abby's father was one of the doctors trying to kill Ellie, you know, but for the greater good, yeah. But it's a morally, like, gray sort of thing. And Abby, of course, you know, is upset and wants revenge. Kind of like Abby's father, you know, being a doctor trying to kill a little girl, but for the greater good. Joel was killing a bunch of doctors, which was definitely, like, inhumane, I guess, but trying to save a little girl. So you have an interesting, like, dynamic there about the, like, being morally gray, you know. One was doing something, I guess, morally good or morally bad for the greater good. The other one was doing something morally good, but not entirely good, you know what I mean? But they don't really touch on that. It feels like, and this is more so exemplified by the game. The game wants you to empathize with Abby, but doesn't present her in, like, a morally gray kind of character. I don't know if that's entirely true, actually, but, and to be fair, we didn't see too much of Abby in this season. Apparently, part 3 is going to be more about her. But also, like, there's just, like, the tone of this show is, like, it's not as bleak and, like, a feeling of, like, impending doom as the game did, you know. That was one thing I feel like the game did really well. To a fault, almost, because the game's, like, depressing. But, like, for one thing that, a lot of people have brought up, and this is another spoiler, is the scene where Dina reveals to Ellie that she's pregnant, right? In the game, Ellie is, like, mad at Dina because now Dina's a burden for Ellie, right? In the show, it's not like that at all, which on the one hand, I do kind of like that, because they're, you know, Ellie and Dina are in love. They got great chemistry, you know, Bella Ramsey and Isabella Marcet, I think that's her name. They do have really great chemistry. That part I did enjoy. And obviously, if they love each other, you know, and one tells the other that they're pregnant, that is exciting news, and you are going to be happy. You're going to show some joy, sure. But on the other hand, the idea of Dina being a burden for Ellie was an interesting idea in the game, and that was just not really present at all in the show. And I guess it was present a little bit, but, like, it wasn't treated like it was a big deal. But another thing that I guess just doesn't really work when you adapt this show, and I said, like, you know, in terms of an adaptation, they'd still, like, nail it, sure. But Bella Ramsey, look, Bella Ramsey got a lot of hate just because the internet is the internet, and, like, I'm not trying to hop on that hate train, you know, because they are great in this show, you know, but because they did not touch on, like, the time jump, you know, they didn't explore that, Bella Ramsey still kind of looks the same as they did in the first season, and they don't look like an adult, you know, about to have a kid, no less, and I just can't really, I'm having a hard time buying her as this ruthless, like, killer, you know, that they try to portray Ellie as. Like, Bella Ramsey is absolutely amazing and deserves awards. At least, like, award, like, nominations for this show. But then you get to the part where, like, Ellie is killing people kind of, like, cold-bloodedly as well. And it's not really that convincing. And I feel really bad for saying that, but it's true. Look, this season is still, it has a lot of the strengths that the first season does, you know. The performances are great. The, the production and all that, like, the show looks great. The locations that they go to look great. We get more infected. That was a big issue with the first season, that we didn't get enough infected. And we get quite a good bit of infected in this season, although even then it's a little lackluster. And as an adaptation, they changed certain things that should be changed, right, in order to work better as a show. But what they're adapting, I guess, it's not even really the show's fault. It's the game's fault, because what they adapted is inherently flawed. But I feel like there's ways they could have done it a bit better. Like, I feel like killing off Joel, you had to do that, sure. But doing it in the way they did, I feel like you could have, at least, like, the end of the season. And also, like, this season ends really abruptly. And, yeah, like, this is only a chunk of the game. But it still ends abruptly. And I don't know, like, look, I'll watch season 3. Because I still have a lot of respect for this show and how they're able to adapt a game and do it this well. But I don't know, it doesn't really work what they did here. It's hard to put into words, really. I hope I did my best. In the end, I didn't hate The Last of Us Season 2, but it's definitely not as good as the first season. And a lot of that isn't really the show's fault, it's the game's fault. But they did some odd, like, I did mention that they make changes to help this story, like, work better as a show, but they made some changes that I don't think worked as well. Like I said, like, stuff with Dina being, like, pregnant and being a burden. Like, again, I like the idea of that being, like, not so much a burden, but, like, have that in there a little bit at least, you know? In the end, I'm gonna give The Last of Us Season 2 a 7 out of 10. So that's my opinion on The Last of Us Season 2. Try to keep the discourse in the comments respectful, because The Last of Us as a whole is just very, like, divisive and toxic. So try to keep it civil, alright? Anyways, what do you guys think about this season of The Last of Us? Do you guys like it? Do you guys not like it? Have you guys seen it? Have you guys not seen it? And if you haven't seen it, do you guys want to see it, not want to see it? Anything about the show, let me know down below. Anyways, be sure to like the video, comment, subscribe, or I will hit you with a golf club. Bye!